Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in this one, we're going to be going over Shadowlands and the PvP gearing system that's coming into place for Shadowlands, how it works, what it looks like. I'll be testing it out, what I think about it, because what I think a lot of us were expecting is not what is actually being delivered. But basically, if you've been playing in Battle for Azeroth, you'll understand that gearing through PvP, if you do something like a random battleground, you'll have a chance at a piece of gear at the end of it. That piece of gear could be any slot, likely any stat combination, probably limited to some options, but a relatively large pool of stat options, or any slot of gear. And it's at a pretty low item level, a very unimpressive item level, one that you basically ignore. I feel like you don't gear whatsoever through random battlegrounds in BFA. That there's no purpose to gearing through random battlegrounds, even as a stepping stone to getting into ranked content. The gear from it is basically irrelevant in Battle for Azeroth. The gear that you get is not guaranteed, so you're kind of fighting two battles there in terms of it not mattering ultimately. Now, moving into Shadowlands, I'm worried that it still somewhat is the case. Now, unlike Battle for Azeroth, where you did a random battleground and it had a chance to give you random gear, in Shadowlands, you'll do a random battleground and it will give you honor, similarly to the older systems, pre-Legion, where you would award honor, and then you'll come here to the Enclave in Oribos, and there will be Purveyor Zokul, and he will sell you honor gear, which I've already pre-purchased a lot on the beta, but you would have to farm this through random battlegrounds. So let's say I just dinged max level, I'm a Retribution Paladin, I'm looking for like a good two-handed weapon. What kind of stat combinations am I looking for, right? So we've got a lot of versatility, mastery, haste mastery is definitely not appealing. Critical strike is not that appealing in PvP. I'm not seeing anything as far as weapons in terms of, this was one thing I was concerned about, is the stat pool on the gear. So you'll be able to go to this vendor, right? Let's just go back to the, before we get back to the feedback process of it, let's just straightforward look at what it looks like. You'll be able to buy a piece of gear that is 158 item level. Okay, that's initially. So you'll go to random battlegrounds until you get 3,675 honor, and then you can come to this vendor, and I could buy this two-handed polearm, and it'll have versatility mastery, let's say, right? And I'll buy it. In comparison of that gear, right? Let's look at Raid Finder, right? What does Raid Finder award me? So Shadowlands, Castle Nathria is the first raid. On Raid Finder difficulty, what kind of item level? So Raid Finder gear is 187. That is massively higher than the random battleground gear, right? At 158, nearly 50 item levels higher from Raid Finder. Now you can utilize honor to upgrade these items. So let's say I went through some battlegrounds, I bought this sword. Now I'm going to have to continue to go through random battlegrounds to upgrade it. It's going to cost me 2,600. I feel like the totals are still not decided, and I can upgrade it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. It's costing more and more. 5 times. I can upgrade my honor piece 5 times, bringing it to 190 item level. Okay, so 190 item level. Again, the Raid Finder was 187. That's a lot of grinding for one piece of gear that is, in my mind, equivalent to a Raid Finder piece. Now, in Battle for Azeroth, if you played, you'll probably remember Blood of the Enemy as an essence to unlock, being a pretty nasty one to get in the process. Now, I don't know what the exact values are going to be for honor. I feel like they're definitely not going to be what this says, because this says 300 honor if I win the first one, and then that goes down after the first one. So I probably needed 30,000 honor to upgrade that one weapon that its initial item level was 50 item levels lower than Raid Finder. I'm probably going to have to grind 30,000 honor, and this right now says 300 honor for a win, to upgrade my one piece to Raid Finder. I'm just going to go out on a whim and say that that is an extremely tedious process in comparison to just stepping into dungeons. I mean, if we just take a look at a dungeon on Mythic 0, we're getting 183 item immediately. So 30 item levels higher immediately, right? Just from doing a Mythic 0. Won't be able to upgrade it, so a Mythic 0 will be worse than the random battleground gear after you upgrade it with somewhere close to 30,000 honor, according to these numbers. Is it worth it for 7 item levels? Is it worth that much of a random battleground grind for that piece of gear for 7 item levels comparatively, right? So if we're comparing gearing in PvP to PvE, do you really want to go through that process? To me, that seems extraordinarily high, an extraordinarily high grinding process, which then leads me into the second problem with the system, is that the gear doesn't have every stat combination. So, for example, here on my boots, I can only buy 2 pairs of boots. One is crit haste, the other one is crit haste. Oh, these are gloves. There's only 1 pair of boots. Wait a minute. There's actually only 1 pair of boots, and it's crit haste, which would not be good stats for PvP, let alone probably for Ret in general even. I'm not sure the stat priority of Ret in PvE and Shadowlands, but generally in PvP, you want versatility on pretty much every class. It's not bad. So to have these pieces of gear that there's only 1 slot, they don't even have versatility, and they come from the PvP vendor. We've got one. We've got the belt. That might be all right. Generally, a lot of classes want haste versatility. Okay, so we've got a ring we could go after to try and get correctly statted gear, which, depending on if PvP scaling is still in Shadowlands, your stats matter a lot more than your item level. So you wouldn't want to wear one of these pieces at 190 with very bad stats over a Mythic 0 piece of gear at 183 item level with the correct stats. So what I think what they've done is that they've created a vendor where you earn a currency to buy gear, right? So they've technically delivered a PvP vendor, right? There's a system in PvP to earn currency to buy gear through PvP. The problem is, to get the gear to a Raid Finder item level is going to be a really long time of grinding. I think to the point where I would just rather do a Mythic 0 dungeon than do that many random battlegrounds to get a piece of gear that's a Raid Finder piece. And a lot of the slots don't have the stats that I want. Why do I want to put time into upgrading a pair of boots with crit and haste? Why do I want to do 30,000 honor grind for boots with bad stats? I don't. So I'm going to just do PvE to get that gear, right? So it's not solving the problem that PvP players had with the gearing method, right? Ultimately, I am still going to have to PvE quite a lot. I mean, looking at the itemization on these pieces, it seems like maybe 2 or 3 of them would be adequate, and I can invest the time to upgrade 2 or 3 of these pieces and wear them. But the rest of it is just not really, it's not worth it. It's not going to be worth the honor grind. So I'm a bit worried about that. When we look at the Conquest vendor, it's a similar story, except when you get higher rated, right, the item level of these pieces is better when you buy them. It still looks like it's uncertain because you can't get Conquest on the beta to test it. If you to be able to put, let's say, this two-hander on the upgrade NPC here to the right and upgrade it once I get to a certain level, For example, let's say I cap my conquest in the first week, and who knows, they don't have any values. Let's just say we get enough conquest to I can buy my two-handed weapon. I feel like that's probably unlikely to be able to buy it. It never was like that in Warlords of Draenor, to be able to buy a weapon that quickly. But let's just say you can. I buy this weapon, and then a few months down the road, I'm 2400 rating in arenas, and that's generally the highest item level threshold for gear is 2400. So would I be able to bring my two-hander that I started with and upgrade it with Conquest? There's a lot of unanswered questions that I'm not sure if are going to be answered in the beta. I really hope they are, because I have a huge amount of concerns with this system. The first one is, how much honor do you actually get and conquest do you actually get? Because I feel like these values are out of date for the current game. These are likely the values that are just translating over from Battle for Azeroth, which ultimately don't matter too much because honor was just more or less a cosmetic thing. So getting a small amount of it compared to a lot of it didn't ultimately matter towards your player progression, just your cosmetic progression. The conquest was somewhat helpful to capping your 500 conquest cap, but am I only going to get 500 conquest points a week? Am I going to get more conquest points the higher rated I am? Is it going to go back, copy, and paste exactly the same as Warlords of Draenor? There's a lot of unanswered questions in that regard. This vendor does at least have a two-handed weapon with haste and versatility, but I feel like there's a lot of potential. So this gear is a little bit better itemized, at least for plate. With the helmet having versatility, right? The conquest gear would be your like end goal gear. You wouldn't want to be wearing the random battleground gear forever. So maybe they just want the random battleground gear for super PvP casuals, so you can upgrade your gear to Raid Finder. I mean, if you're out there and you're somebody who just logs in and does random battlegrounds, that's all you do, and this seems appealing to you, please let me know in the comments down below. But the way that I used to view the PvP gearing system was that you got max level and you just started doing random battlegrounds. That got you at least a decent set of gear to then go into rated arenas or rated battlegrounds, where you then weekly started getting conquest upgrades to that honor set. That's how it worked in the past in Warlords of Draenor, which in my mind, if we're going to go with this system, was the best iteration. It was a system that had multiple expansions of small improvements made to it, to the point where it was very polished. So I'm a bit worried that we're going back to a system that's a little bit more chaotic and not as polished, and there's a lot of unanswered questions that I would like answers to. And I don't know if they plan on enabling, for example, the ranked ladder on the beta and letting us test out a week of capping to see how many points we can earn in a week, what rating thresholds. I don't know if there's a plan to do that. But if they just plan on going with, you get 500 conquests like Battle for Azeroth, I mean, it's going to take you a long time to get to this weapon. It's going to take you, what is the math on that? 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000. It's going to take you 7 weeks to get to this weapon. And when you're unranked, it's basically a raid finder weapon. You'll have to get higher rating to upgrade this gear. So is it going to be a competitive option? Surely it is going to be for the slots of gear that have your best stats. I do see myself, for example, wanting to get this pole arm as a Retribution Paladin. It's two-handed. Actually, does it have strength? Doesn't look like it has strength. This is an intellect weapon. Okay, maybe I'm not interested in getting the weapon from PvP. It's crit inverse. It's like somewhat better, but I'd rather get something other than crit. It's just I feel like it's such a hard word to describe the way I feel about this when I look at it, because by all technicalities it is a PvP vendor. I earn a PvP currency, I come here and I buy gear from it from doing PvP. The problem on my observation is that the gear is all bad. So why do I want to earn currency to buy bad gear for my character? I don't. I would rather do the PvE content and get gear that is good for my character that then lets me play arena and win arena because gear matters. The other thing to take into consideration as well is what kind of trinkets are going to be sold on here. I mean, I'm only seeing the PvP oriented trinkets that let you get out of crowd control and some stat sticks, so maybe they haven't been designed yet. Maybe I'm jumping the gun here on this one, but I feel like we're 2 months away from release. Forever hold your peace is kind of the moment I'm at when I'm raising this type of criticism, because I don't want this to go live in a way that I think is going to be ultimately received negatively by the community, because this is something that, which ironically is what we're asking for, because I feel like at the end of Warlords of Draenor, a lot of PvPers wanted templated PvP that Legion delivered. If anything, they wanted Legion to be more templated than it was, where you wouldn't need to grind artifact power and you wouldn't need to unlock your honor talents. I actually feel like a lot of at least ranked PvP players wanted it more templated than it was in Legion. And then when the templates were lifted and the gear that was awarded from PvP wasn't great and you had to PvE to get it, grinding gear became really a problem to get, at least for players who wanted to focus on PvP. To me, the only way to solve this gear is to have a PvP stat. To solve it in a way that satisfies someone who wants to be a PvP gear progression player, right? That is the only way, because it's fair enough, If I'm a PvE player, right? If you think about this for a second, and gear is gear in WoW. If I go do my dungeon and it's entirely random what I get, my piece of loot might never drop, right? But if a PvP player can earn a currency and buy the exact piece that they want, that's unfair. That's just inherently unfair, right? So for the gear to be competitive and equivalent to PvE gear awarded from PvE content, I shouldn't say PvE gear, but gear awarded from PvE content, if it's deterministic like this where you pick it, it has to have worse stats, or it has to be lower item level, or both. Otherwise, it's inherently unfair towards making a PvE player have to PvP, right? So to me, the only solution is to have a PvP specific stat. Resilience, PvP power, it's been so many different names that it scales when you attack a player to a higher item level, so that when you're in PvP, the PvP gear is the better gear. That's the only solution, but it's not what's being offered. So if it's going to be offered the way that it is, I'm just kind of preparing myself to be let down by it, because it doesn't see it's half of what I would want. I personally am on the template side of things. I enjoyed Legion, and I would have liked Legion to be more templated for PvP. Every spec was balanced and tuned to arenas on their own, so every spec was competitive and fun to play. If I much preferred that personally, but if we're gonna grind and unlock gear from PvP, and then the gear is ultimately not great, I'm just gonna get PvE gear. I'm just not gonna pay attention to this. So like all this effort going in to give this vendor, basically the only problem that it's solved is that you can more or less pick the schedule of the gear. So for example, in BFA, right, you would cap 500 conquest, and at the end of week 1, Blizzard would determine what piece you could get. So let's just say you could, in week 1, you could buy a helmet. So you'd go to the little Mugambala guy or the Brown, wherever vendor for Alliance. I haven't played Alliance at all in BFA. Go to Mugambala and you would turn it in for a pretty low item level guaranteed helm slot, right? So instead of them picking the schedule for you, you can pick the schedule, because, well, I'm not going to earn enough points to buy my weapon this week, but if I save for 2 weeks, I could buy the weapon. So it took the schedule out of their hands and gave it to us, I guess, if you thought that was a problem, and solved that. And the other problem it's solving is if I jump into random battlegrounds, I'm not just randomly awarded this slot with the stats. I work towards the slot and the stats, right? Like it's solving half the problem, but the other problem that is like not maybe it's only 40% of the problem. The 60% of the problem is that the gear is just bad. I I'm not going to put the time to grind the random battleground gear for bad gear. There's just no. I would much rather do the dungeon for an hour at the shot at my best piece of gear than grind random battlegrounds for I don't even know how long to get that much honor to upgrade it 5 times for a piece of gear that's bad. Like I'm just not going to. So it's a bit of a letdown when I'm looking at this. Like there are some pieces like this helmet I wouldn't mind buying. Haste versatility. The necklaces seem good. The rings would seem good. So you'll likely gear some slots of it from PvP, and you'll be able to determine those pieces. But to fill out the rest of your gear, you're gonna do PvE if you care about having the right stats, which generally is what matters the most, is getting the right stats. So I'm a little disappointed with it at the moment, and I have already pointed out I don't know. The only solution I can see is by putting a PvP specific stat on the gear that enhances it in PvP. That way, a PvEer isn't obligated to get it to raid because they could get the exact piece they need, but it's still the best gear for the PvP player that wants to gear in PvP. I don't see any other solution. Unless they wanted to add a deterministic method to PvE also. I guess it would be important to note that you will still cap, right? And you'll get a weekly vault for PvP gear. So maybe you're just going to have a lot of gear thrown at you all at once. And it doesn't end up being a problem. I'm just walking my way over to the Great Vault. Like you would cap, and then you would go over here. And this city gets pretty confusing. I think it's the next door. You would go over here. We're almost getting there. Where I know it's the next one. I know it's no, not this one, but the next one. I know it is. You would go over to the Great Vault after your weekly cap. This one. Open it. Depending on how many games you played, I think you'll be able to choose more pieces of gear. So like that weekly random gear still exists, right? And I think the more conquest you earn, if you earn the maximum, you'll get 3 chests, and then you pick which one you want. So you'd open 3 of these, and it'll give you a helmet from the first one, bracers from the second one, boots from the third one, and then you pick which one you want to try and alleviate some of that RNG that was found with the chest system currently in BFA, where you couldn't pick what slot it was. You can sort of pick. It's still not great, but if you did everything maxed out in the content for everything, you've got a very large selection of stuff, but you would again have to do everything. It's not PvP only. But you've got this on top of that deterministic system. I'm not sold on it at the moment, on it actually addressing the core issue of PvP players' complaints for wanting a progression system through PvP. So I'm very worried about it. The only improvements I could offer as solutions would be to have every single stat combination possible, right? But if they do that, then it's going to be mandatory for PvEers, because then they can get their best statted gear through a deterministic method. So I don't feel like that solution is going to be a go. And then the other solution would be to add a PvP stat that enhances this gear awarded from PvP in PvP. But it seems like they backed down on that initially in the earlier stages of alpha. There was like a PvP stat data link or something, and then they backed down on that. And there was an interview with Ian where they said they don't plan on doing a PvP specific stat. So right now, like, I want to be really excited about Shadowlands. I think there's a lot of cool and awesome stuff coming, but I don't think that this iteration of the PvP vendors is going to deliver what the players who are asking for it are asking for. So hopefully there will be a solution to it. Otherwise, I have to bite the bullet and just do more PvE. Anyways, leave a comment down below what you think. Like the video if you liked the video. Might be a hard one to like, I know. and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. I'm uploading content daily. This is actually the second video of the day. I just felt like going over it because I was really just thinking about it when Honor became available in the beta, and I was thinking like, this is a lot of Honor you're going to grind, and for a piece of gear that's kind of bad. So it just came to my mind. I want to make a video with some of my thoughts about it. I've rambled on for it for far too long at this point. So we'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.